Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Girls. We're back here via Zoom, keeping everyone safe through the pandemic. I'm with my mom, and this month, the month of October, we are focusing our attention on cancer. Specifically, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But today on the show, we are going to talk to very good friends of ours, one of our friends who's a cancer survivor, and she suffered from leukemia.
Right. We're going to have Christine Falvello, who people in our area watching in the Hazleton area are very familiar with that name. Christine and her husband is going to be on as well. Her husband is Connie Falvello, attorney Conrad Falvello. These two people are going to shed some light on not only having cancer, but what it's like for the family, because cancer affects the entire family. So we have lots to tell you. Make sure you call your friends and stay tuned. When we come back, you'll meet Christine and Connie. Welcome back, and today I have two fabulous guests on the show with us. Janine, we have Christine Falvello, who is a cancer survivor, and we have her husband, attorney Conrad Falvello, and both of these people are no strangers to the area. They're no strangers to us. As you know, they're great friends of our family. We've been friends for years, and we are just so thrilled today to have Christine on, because you went through quite a struggle. And along with that struggle, your whole family went through it. So your husband's on today as a support to be able to share with everyone out there what the experience was like for him. But Christine, why don't we get started with you? First of all, you look fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Happy. You look so nice and healthy. Tell us what happened in January of 2017.
Okay, I'll do the best I can. I didn't know I had cancer. It was right after the holidays, and I'd been feeling just a little tired during the holidays, and I just couldn't seem to summon enough energy. So about a week after New Year's, I went to bed one night on a Sunday, fully expecting to get up and go to the office the next morning, because I was running my business at the time. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and I was terribly ill. And I had to call my husband, Connie, and we didn't know if I could travel in the car. That's how quickly I got ill. So he called an ambulance that took me up to the hospital. And that's how it started. Within 24 hours, give or take, I was at Hershey Medical Center, and I was diagnosed with leukemia, and my treatment started the next day.
Well, that's quite a turnaround to go from one day feeling a little tired, go to the hospital, and all of a sudden that shock hits you when they say the word cancer. You have leukemia. What was that like for you, Connie, to hear that?
Chris is right. She woke me up about 2:30 in the morning. She was extremely weak. I tried to get her out of bed. I was intending to put her in the car and drive her up to the hospital, but she couldn't stand up. And so we had no choice but to call the ambulance. They had to bring a wheel, like a little chair with wheels, just to get her from. They went from the bed to the floor, and then into the chair, and then out in the cold to the ambulance, and then up to the hospital. It was very sudden. It was not like you had a symptom and there was an X-ray, and if you had a lump in your breast or an opacity in the lung. It was very, very sudden and very, very unexpected. And it was not something that you could do surgery and take it out and fix it. It was unseen. And we got to the hospital, and Chris, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell this. We got very fortunate because when we get into the ER, Dr. Lenko, Jody Lenko, who we know since she's a little girl, came in, her white blood cell count was through the roof. I think Jody knew what it was, but then Dr. Mike Evans, who trained at Hershey with Dr. David Claxton, who trained at MD Anderson, which is maybe the top blood cancer center in the world, was at Hershey. And I think Dr. Evans knew what this was. It was a very rare cancer, very rare leukemia. And, Dr. Evans, I remember vividly when they got her into the room and our three kids were there, our son had gotten there and our daughters were there. And he said, "You have leukemia." And I think he knew it was a rare form. We couldn't confirm that until we got to Hershey and had to wait 48 hours for the test because it's a very specific test. And Dr. Claxton saw her right away. He knew, I think, what it was without the blood test. 1,300 cases a year, they told us, in this country. They told us also most of them don't make it because if they're in a rural hospital and don't have the people who can recognize what this is, they lose them, they pass. Here, we were fortunate to have Jody and Mike Evans and Dr. Claxton to get us to one of the top two blood cancer centers in the state of Pennsylvania.
I know you had a lot of support and talking about all of these wonderful doctors that were so blessed to have exceptional care. And you hear story after story after story of all these exceptional doctors that are in northeastern Pennsylvania that were blessed. And it sounds to me that, you had a guardian angel with you, Christine, with your diagnosis too. Is it more catching this quickly to treat it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I read later when I read up on the form of cancer that I have about a third of the people who are diagnosed don't make it past the first couple of weeks. And the reason is it's such a rare form of cancer that you really need someone who has heard of this kind of cancer and can treat it very, very quickly.
Now you told me the name of the cancer, and it's kind of a long name. Do you want to? It's abbreviated AML. Do you want to tell us what that is?
Well, it's actually a PML. It's a form of acute myeloid leukemia. It's called acute promyelocytic leukemia. So it's APL or APML.
Okay.
So, the nurses at Hershey, who, by the way, I can't say enough about those nurses. They were one of many people who saved my life, literally. They said I was lucky. If you can be lucky to get a form of cancer, I was lucky to get this form of cancer and to respond well to the treatment because it's usually very treatable. And I have to say, Janine was saying how the family was very scared. I was not scared. I knew as soon as they told me that my white blood count was so high, to myself, I said, "You have leukemia." But I didn't know very much about it. So I wasn't scared at that point. And the next day, the medical staff was so reassuring. And when I got to Hershey in an ambulance, they had a team waiting for me. They took me right in. I remember being trundled down the hall on a stretcher and looking up at the ceiling and thinking, then I hope I come out of here, because I really didn't, I didn't understand what was coming. And when I got there, I had a whole team on the floor, the oncology floor, where the blood cancers are, waiting to treat me. And they started within an hour or two on a specific oral medication that is supposed to knock this form of cancer very quickly. So I was lucky, and there was an angel watching out for me. But my doctor told me that he used the word cure. I don't know if you can say that word ever with cancer. And I know that a relapse is possible with the form of cancer that I have. I know it's not likely, but I was very confident in him. And even though my treatment path was anything but uneventful, I still had a lot of confidence in the care that I got.
When we come back, let's talk about dealing with cancer through the pandemic and how that kind of added another twist to the story. So you're watching The Girls. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to The Girls. You're watching us on SSP TV. And we want to welcome back our guest. We have Christine Falvello, who is a leukemia cancer survivor, and her husband, attorney Conrad Falvello. He's here today to represent the family because, as we know, when cancer strikes, it strikes the whole family. So, Christine, before we went on break, you were talking about how recognizable this was to this team of doctors that you had immediate treatment. So take us from when you started with your treatment, everything else that happened to you through the course of this treatment of your cancer.
Okay, well, I can only fill in the highlights here because I was not aware of parts of my treatment initially. I spent about a month and a half or 2 months in the hospital with treatment. I had a very rough course of treatment at that time. That's where I received intensive everyday chemotherapy, and it really knocked me for a loop. And if you want more details about that, Connie can fill you in because he was right by my side. But then just briefly moving forward, I had about 9 weeks of infusion therapy that I had locally at the cancer center under the guidance of Dr. Mike Evans. And then I started 2 years of oral maintenance, they call it, with oral chemotherapeutic drugs.
Okay, so you were hospitalized for the first part of this.
Yes, I was. I don't know if I was ill from the chemotherapy or from the cancer, but I was not. I was in and out of the ICU several times. I was not responding. I was non-responsive. I remember the beginning of it. I remember bits in the middle, and I remember the end when I had to go to rehab for 3 weeks to be able to sit up and eat and stand and walk and all those things. But for the details in the hospital, my wonderful husband has to fill you in, and the rest of my family could too on that.
All right, Connie, take it away. What was it like?
It was a bumpy road, without a doubt. At the time this happened, I was working as district director for Congressman Barletta, and of course, when it happened, I called him immediately, and to his credit, he said, "Whatever you and Chris need, do," without hesitation. And our entire staff here in the district, in our Hazleton office, in our Harrisburg office, in our Carlisle office, in our Sunbury office, the same thing. And our Washington office, it's whatever you need, do. And where it ended up is because we had a Harrisburg office, I would stay in Hershey. And my days were I would get up early, I'd go to the hospital, stay there until the medical team came in to evaluate her. And then I would go to work, and our office was only 15 minutes from the hospital, so I was close by, and that was certainly advantageous for me. But there were a couple times when I got a call. One I remember very vividly. I was at a Senate hearing at the Capitol. I was attending it on the congressman's behalf because that was my job to do things here in the district when he was in Washington 3 weeks during the month. And my phone buzzed, and I picked it up, and I went out in the hall, and they said, "You have to come here right away." And because they were moving her to intensive care, they didn't know what was going on, and they weren't sure she was going to make it through the day. So I did, and what it was is that the two chemotherapies that she was getting, one called idarubicin, which was very, very powerful stuff, and one called arsenic trioxide, believe it or not, rat poison.
Arsenic. Yeah.
Had caused an obstruction in her intestine, and that was life-threatening in her case at that time because these two chemotherapies had also driven her white blood cell count down to 0, which
Wow.
means that she had no immunity whatsoever. And so we had to, she spent a week there. If I went in to see her, I had to gown up from head to toe, hat, mat, face mask, gloves, pants, booties, everything. And I had to help the nurses with her because she wasn't responsive. And she wasn't talking, she wasn't eating. She was on liquid, nutrition for a long time. She didn't eat, about 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first time in the ICU. And then the second time in the ICU was because she was getting a lot of fluids. Her body was not able to get rid of the fluids. So her hands were swollen, her feet were swollen. They had to go back to the ICU and get her on Lasix and get that down. And there again, that was life-threatening for her because it impacted her lungs and her heart. And then the third time, she was just in bad shape because she was not communicating and not eating, and they were very concerned about that. So they put her in the ICU, and they thought she was okay. They transferred her to the room, but by that same evening, she was back in the ICU and was there about 3 days. And thankfully, after the third trip, she started to turn around and began to come out of in the sense that she was more responsive, more communicative, and remarkably retained a lot of her physical strength. Because when we started to, in the ICU, to get her out of bed, stand up, and even walk, the doctors and the nurses were pretty amazed that she still had that strength because she hadn't eaten in weeks, hadn't had food. And then for the last few days in the hospital, she would get hungry, but she would have trouble eating. I remember one time she said, "I want pancakes." And so I left the hospital. I went to this nice little place outside of Hershey, got the most wonderful looking pancakes you could buy, brought them back to the hospital, and she couldn't eat them. Because although she wanted to eat them, she couldn't. It made her nauseous. And within a few days, she was thankfully in rehab at Hershey, at a very good rehab center there. And she wasn't there very long. I would say 5 days maybe. And again, she turned around very remarkably, started to eat. And she's right. When she came home, her day was a nurse came to the house at 7 o'clock, took a blood work. The blood work had to go and get analyzed. Then we would take her to the wellness center for an EKG because the chemo can affect her T wave in her heart. And the purpose of the blood work was the chemo can affect the potassium and magnesium. If that was too low, then she would have to get potassium or magnesium first and then the arsenic trioxide. And that day, if that was a day for her, it would be all day in bed at the wellness center, 6 hours. So a lot of her days were wake up 7 o'clock, give blood at home, get an EKG, go for chemo, and that chemo could be anywhere from 3 to 6 hours, and she did that for over 2 months. Any cancer patient, including Christine, who was, when COVID hit, off chemo, not very long, but off chemo, has to be very careful because the immune system, you just don't know. It could be compromised. Chris, you could fill in the spaces there, but I know her doctors have told her she has to be very careful.
So Chris, what's life like for you now that you have a compromised immune system and we're still sort of in COVID? I mean, you have to be scared everywhere you go.
Well, no, I'm out of the being scared phase, and I'm determined I'm going to enjoy life. I mean, as a cancer patient, and I thought I was not a cancer patient anymore, but a nurse said, "No, you're a cancer patient in remission." So I will be that for the rest of my life, but I'm determined that I'm going to enjoy life, but I'm going to be careful, and I am careful, and I'm inoculated, and I will go back for more as soon as they say I can go for my booster. I'm going to do that, and I wear a mask when I'm out in places inside. But life is wonderful now for me. I mean, it's like you have another birthday, really. But it's taken me, I have to say, about 4 years to work past this and get my physical strength back. And I was affected mentally quite a bit too. So I wasn't writing well. I couldn't carry on a conversation well with people. I couldn't drive for about 6 months afterwards because I was too weak, and then I couldn't turn my head certain ways, and I was just affected a lot of ways. I was having trouble walking. I had to go for physical therapy for balance. So cancer treatment can knock the stuffing out of you. It really can. But if you have your family there and the doctors, good doctors, that is everything. That is everything. And I was extremely lucky. I'm so glad I didn't have cancer during COVID, because I don't know if I would have survived if I didn't have my family coming into the hospital and intermittently in my consciousness being able to see them. I don't know that I would have made it. I'm getting emotional. I don't know that I would have made it. And for the people who are really ill with cancer and don't have someone coming in can't get their family in there, that's a terrible thing. I have to say, it's terrible.
I mean, what kept you going? Just seeing your family and seeing light at the end of the tunnel? Were you seeing some progress? You were so sick.
Yeah, sometimes there was no light, but you just kind of had to believe that it was going to happen. But when you have a husband who hangs over the bed and his face is 2 inches from your nose, and he says, "You got to eat and you got to move." And that's what he did. And I was so mad that if I'd had the energy, I would have slapped him. I couldn't do that. So he would always pull me back. He listened to me complain. He drove me around. There were a lot of follow-up doctor appointments for several years because the side effects of the chemotherapy were really something. So
there were 3 or 4 hospitalizations after she got out too.
Right.
Christine, we're so happy that you are doing better and well, and we appreciate you both sharing such an intimate story about your cancer journey and how you're doing now. And we thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for the
You're
opportunity.
very welcome. Thanks for having us.
And continued good health. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks,
And we'll see you
everybody.
next time right here on The Girls. Make sure you support the American Cancer Society, donate, volunteer, and do what you can to help support the fight against cancer.